Giddy up. I would like to call to order the Transportation Planning Workshop for Tuesday, November 12th. We only have discussion items, and we'll start with Derek Turner, our city engineer, will give us a brief, or maybe not so brief, overview of the City of Willow Park residential streets.
Okay, thank you. So a few months ago, we updated the CIP that we had done, I think in 2017, I believe. And the original CIP was water and sewer, so we went back and took the street evaluation documentation that we had done some time ago, I think that was maybe 2015, and updated it and took that information and created a CIP for the streets. The map I gave you shows the recommended improvements, and I know that's very hard to read. Again, I'm sorry, this was kind of last minute. I have a large map, but we couldn't get it up on the screen. So, but I've got a list that I'll go through. Just like the original CIP for the other infrastructure, this was broken out into excuse me, I'm sorry. And my printer apparently doesn't work for me either. So this was broken down into 1 to 5 year increments, 6 to 10 year increments, and 11 to 15 and 16 to 20. The evaluation, we basically drove every city in town, all of the major thoroughfares as well as the residential streets. And if you look, and hopefully everybody can read this, but we broke it, the different scheduling breaks down by phases. Priority 1 was the kind of the magenta color, and there's no way you can be able to read this.
Yeah, can you give a list of the streets? Because I'm supposed to.
So the phase 1 improvements, which is kind of the pinkish or magenta color, included Crown Road. And this is from Live Oak Road up to Ridge Road. And that's something that we talked about in the recent past about upgrading anyway because of some issues with the road. The orange, and that was proposed to be a concrete street, and eventually Crown would be on the program to do concrete all the way down because it's one of the major thoroughfares, and that's kind of how we looked at it. All of your collector or higher arterial type streets were projected to be concrete. The priority 1 reconstruction or asphalt streets would be the orange color, which would be Old Ford Road, Vista Drive, from Coronado Court up to Ridge Road and down Ridge about a block and a half. Sandbass Court, Trinity Court, and I think that's all. Those were actually on our the next street project, capital project that we had projected was going to be those streets. One thing I'd point out is that when we did our evaluation several years ago, the original evaluation, there were some streets that were projected to be seal coated. There were some that were projected to be overlays. There's still a few, but for the most part, the streets in town, just because of the way they were constructed back when they were constructed, most of them were ranch roads or private roads that were eventually taken over, and they just weren't built to street standards. Mainly the subgrade and the base section was pretty inadequate. I don't think you would find any streets in town that have subgrade that was treated, which is typical for an asphalt street here because of the clay soils. The ones we've tried to do some time ago, we did an overlay on, and they didn't hold up well, and that was mainly because of the subgrade underneath. A lot of them have a very thin layer of asphalt on top. I'm sure most of it was just chip sealed, and maybe 2 or 3 times over the years, but none of it or very little of it appears to have been hot mix. So these improvements by and large are gonna be, when I talk about the asphalt streets and the reconstruction, that's a complete reconstruction. That's taking the street down to subgrade, treating it, possibly using what little base and asphalt is there to create a base material and then adding to it. But however you accomplish that, it would include a new base layer and then 2 inches of asphalt on top of that. That's a typical residential street design in this area. So that was phase one. The phase two, concrete streets, which would be the next big capital improvement, would have been Squaw Creek, all the way from Ranch House down to Sam Bass. It would have been extending Ranch House from Crown, where we stopped on the last project, all the way up to Vista. And then, and I will get you a list of this. My list, it printed me the wrong list, but I will get you the list.
It's basically the list that was in the CIP.
It's the list out of the CIP.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there's not any updates to cost or?
There are no updates to cost, or this has only been 2 or 3 months ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
July.
Sam Bass Court and Vista, didn't we do those? The county
No,
did those?
he's talking about Vista Beyond where we've done it, already done it, and Sam Bass
Sam Bass
Court
Court
hasn't been touched
hasn't been
because the
touched.
county didn't get to
Yeah.
it.
Okay, but, okay.
Vista is shown as a priority. I believe that's a priority for reconstruction. The county did an overlay, and you're seeing the same effect that I was talking about. It didn't have the sublayer to hold up the asphalt that they put on it. So ultimately, it'll hold up for a while to the extent that it already has, but ultimately, that's going to be a reconstruction, I'm sure. So, do you want me to go through these priority by priority, or like I said, it's,
I don't think
I can-
so. 'Cause
I mean, it's,
So Derek, for the most part, just about every street we have, residential wise, will have to be redone completely.
yeah, I think that, and I may have cut myself off, but that's kind of what I was getting at. Even when we looked at it some years ago, like I said, there were a few that we determined appeared to us that you could get by with an overlay because what was there didn't look too bad. But if you drive those streets now, you'll see that they're looking pretty bad. And of course, these things are cumulative. So even though, if you'd got to them at the time with maybe an overlay to seal them off and keep them from degrading further, maybe they would have lasted. But now you've got water incursion and
Right.
stuff, so they've deteriorated to the point now where I'd be hard pressed to find any in town that were not. I wouldn't recommend an overlay personally, so.
So you're looking at total reconstruct.
Yeah. I think what you're looking at is reconstruction projects, whether you budget it, if you're gonna do it, whether you budget it or do capital projects. And then those streets, starting with whichever ones you do first, start a seal coat program so that you can protect them, so you're not facing this again in another 5 to 10 years.
So how long, if you basically reconstruct it, right, with asphalt, what would be the lifespan?
Typically, all else being equal, you'd be looking at probably 15 to 20 years before you'd have to have an overlay, most likely.
Right. And that's if you're sealing it?
That's if you're sealing it. And generally, what we recommend when we do CIPs is that you start a 5-year seal coat program.
Right.
So ideally, you'd be recirculating back to those streets every 5 years. That's rarely done, but if you can approach that, then you can extend the life of those streets considerably.
And you're talking side streets, not main arterial streets that would
No, I
last
didn't-
20 years.
I'm not
The
recommending asphalt on any of
Yeah,
them.
'cause asphalt on main roads does not last 20 years.
And I think we're gonna be talking about drainage in a little bit, and it might be worth consideration as you go forward. Squaw Creek's a good example. So Squaw Creek has roadside ditches, and we're projecting a concrete street there. If you're gonna be coming in, which I'm gonna be recommending you do, and upgrading these roadside ditches, you might consider curbing some of those streets. Because the extra cost to curb it while they're pouring concrete would be comparable probably to the drainage work that you would have to do to protect the street. So on Squaw Creek, for example, it's really hilly and up and down, so you probably wouldn't require a lot of storm drainage. Ranch House would not have been a good candidate financially because to convert that now, we would have had to put in a lot of subsurface storm drain, and the cost would have been probably twice as much for it. But on these streets where you have a lot of fall on both sides, and you can drain the water off quickly down to the lower spots and just put in culverts and drain offs, those might be good candidates.
I'm sorry. When you do base, are you looking at base stabilization? You looking about a lye or?
Well, there's two
cement-
options.
Cement slurry
Well,
or?
there's more than two, but there's generally two options that are standard. And it depends on the soil. Most of the time out here, it's cement stabilization. Lime, for instance, the church property, they use lime on that, on a lot of it, because there was some clay soils. A lot of places are they're kind of intermittent sand and clay, and are a little bit more, cement is a little.
But you don't know what you got till you dig it up, right? Okay.
But you're almost guaranteed of hitting some pretty expansive clay. It's just because that's just the way this area is. Very rare that you would find something. Ranch house that we're doing right now has been built over the years and added to. So fortunately, we had a really good base layer on it. But that's only because it's been built up on top of so many times. And they've got down below that level in a couple of places, and you can see the dark clay that they brought up. So that's generally what you're in.
In the CIP that we looked at earlier this year, the numbers that you have cost-wise, especially for these asphalt reconstruction, for example, I'm looking at Old Ford Road, 300K. Is that non-county?
That is non-county.
Okay, so that's if we bid it out. So we are hoping to be able to get through some of these priorities this year with our 100K that's in the.
Right.
And speaking of county, so Vista, county did that road, it didn't replace the subgrade, and so it's already fallen apart. So if we contract out with county to do Old Ford.
Is that
Well,
overlay or reconstruct?
That would be,
It's reconstructed.
Okay, yeah.
And it's in really bad shape. But-
Okay, so
But
we
one thing you need to
can't
know about the county is that they
They-
cannot do stabilization.
Yeah, that's what I
Okay.
was
So-
trying to figure out.
That doesn't mean you can't arrange it so
Sub
that
that
part of
out.
it they could do, but they will not do that part, so.
Okay.
I think laying asphalt is kind of they're pretty good at doing that, but the subgrade and the base and the stabilization is really not there.
and we've tried to do, contractor do the sub base and then they come in with an overlay. And I just don't think, it-
Coordination is a problem.
that's
So,
threading that needle.
Yeah,
I think if you were, again, and I mentioned that their asphalt is kind of their bailiwick, but if you were gonna do it, I would think the best approach would be to have somebody come in, stabilize, put the base, get it to grade, and then just have them come up and put an asphalt overlay on top of it.
Have the county come in and do the asphalt?
If you were gonna do that, if you're gonna use them, that's what I would do. No.
again, it's threading that needle, I mean.
'Cause you could-
Subgrade for how many weeks or months?
Lori was-
Yeah, Lori was terrible, but.
Yeah, that's what I say. Coordination's kind of tough. That's why if you get the base layer down into grade, you have a little bit less of that concern. The other problem, though, you need to consider if you're gonna do something like that too, is that warranty is,
An issue.
who's gonna warranty what?
Yep.
How are you gonna prove, who's responsible? So if you're gonna spend the money to have somebody build it, you need to consider that.
Is it a base failure? Is it an asphalt? That's what you're looking for.
Well, yeah, I mean, you get into that situation, it's hard to come to a real determination on what happened, but if you have a warranty, generally it's not.
I know we're gonna move on to some other things, but would it safe to say that looking at where budgeting each year for residential streets, we're not gonna hit this list very well? So,
No, I think I don't have it broken down between the concrete and the residential, but the total price tag was $13 million.
yeah.
Is that all, and is that residential,
That's everything.
Squaw Creek, Crown?
Yes, that's the Willow Park and roads.
So you look at,
In today's dollars.
Yes.
I am certainly not taking this position, I'm just doing math in my head, but if you did 13 million, you assume a 2.5% interest. You do that over you'd want to do it on a 20-year period because you assume that's probably the lifespan of the asset.
Yep.
You're probably looking at debt service of about $750,000, $800,000 for the next 20 years.
So what if we broke it down, say, we just broke down, pulled it apart, the whole project apart, like residential asphalt streets, for instance, and had that compartmentalized to go to a bond to see how, what do you think about that idea?
I guess it depends on what your cost is. I think, take Old Ford Road, for example. I think if you took that to you're talking about a GO, like they did to an election.
Yeah.
If you took Old Ford and you just put that one street on there, you're gonna get 100% of the people who live on that street. I don't know if you get a lot of support in Willow Park Village for it.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's why if you're gonna do something like that, you have to spread that project out across. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
I think certainly 13 million, you want to do a GO. I mean, I don't think, does the 13 million include Squaw Creek? Would that include?
Yeah, I think the residential streets, you're probably looking at about 60%.
Okay.
At 13 million.
So-
That's a quick,
Just down and dirty and,
60% of the 30 million is?
60% of the
The
13 million would
Oh,
be the
excuse me,
residential
yeah, 13
streets.
would be residential streets.
Yeah.
Okay.
and again, you couldn't go 30 years on a street. You can go 20.
Yeah. Well, and then we don't have money in the budget to seal it every 5 years. It's just gonna be,
That's more where the 100K that we're.
That's,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm talking about. When it comes to residential streets, I know we have other things to get to, but we are behind the 8 ball
Oh, I know.
on maintenance on this.
yeah.
That doesn't include some streets Sam Bass has water lines crossing it. Is that right? So you're gonna have to mitigate, I don't wanna put a new asphalt street down with a water line runs underneath it, because the first time that thing breaks, wasted your money. So there's some things we'll have to mitigate in there as well. But the old cliche is, these streets didn't get here in 5 years, and you're not going to fix them in 5 years. Just depends on what your appetite is.
There was something very interesting, and I'll cover it, perhaps put something together for the next council meeting. At that conference that I went to with putting together like your CIP projects with the tax projections, and it gives a graphic showing how long it would take to pay for it and how much revenue you have coming from this part of town versus this part of town. And it was a brilliant way of being able to communicate it, because we have a very inquisitive populace. And it helped me be able to see that graphic on, okay, so this is how much it's gonna cost. What's the best way to go about getting that money to fix our streets? And now it all incorporated
Yeah, well, I think
development
our
plan.
first phase is figuring out what we need to do, and then we've got to
Yeah.
get pretty creative on some ideas of
And there's,
how to
Well,
finance it. So-
Yeah,
and I will say this.
So we only have 35 minutes left, and
I
we
know.
only have one agenda item. I just want
Here-
you, not to be Doyle here, but
yeah.
So real quick, there is half a cent that the county takes for economic development, and I don't want to poke the bear or open up a can of worms. But
But-
you could dedicate that half cent back to street maintenance and use that as your sales tax grows, you could use that to cover your bonded indebtedness for your 13 million CIP.
okay.
I think
Those
that's
are
worth exploring.
probably things we'll have to get into once we figure out what all our transportation needs are.
Yep.
That is how we,
I would, just one quick thing, we mentioned in the CIP report that you're looking at what to do with your budget. I would really highly recommend that maybe you hit the really bad areas where they just have to do something, but consider putting that money into maintenance, even on the concrete streets, because even though they've got a really long lifespan, they're not gonna hit that unless you take care of it.
Yep.
good point. Thank you, Derek. All right, the next item that we have for discussion is the overview of current, future, and proposed projects on I-20.
Rose, can you bring up the Google Earth that we talked about earlier? Thank you. Can you highlight Ranch House Road, exit and entrance? Yes, highlight that right there. All right. Pardon me for standing up and pointing. So none of these are official city projects. We did have some discussion with TxDOT on this exit ramp right here in front of Stacy Lynch, Railhead Realty, that complex. We were told by TxDOT in Parker County that this is being moved back to right here. So that exit ramp is being moved back. Welcome, Mr. Patrick Law, best city manager of Parker.
I thought that was Sharon.
She's retiring.
Oh, okay, so now, okay.
And Patrick and Potop at the race. So we know that this exit ramp is moving back here. We've had discussions with TxDOT about taking this entrance ramp that is right here and moving it back into this general area. We don't know what they're gonna do with it. Total cost on that is around $750,000. They're trying to fold this project into this project, but as of tonight, I can't tell you for sure what's gonna happen. I know TxDOT wants to do it. I know they're really working hard to do that, but where we stand on that, I don't know. Estimated cost, like I said, about $750K.
For the insurance ramp? Okay.
For this one to be moved. The exit ramp is already, should be let out for about a year.
But this is not city money.
No, this is,
Just to make sure.
It's already approved
It's not city
Yeah,
money.
this is
and ready to go by TxDOT, so,
so the other one,
the exit ramp.
Rose, can you scroll down to the shops? Okay, the other one is trying to do an overpass, thank you, Rose, in this general area. This is where, you've seen a diagram, it's just a diagram, but this is where you've seen that before. Sorry, I'm just getting it right here. That is connect Crown Point down here to some sort of bankhead extension that we'll talk about in the next item. That to do that, you're gonna have to move this exit ramp, or this entrance ramp, excuse me, and move this exit ramp down here at TCA. And so that's some of the confusion, and that's what TxDOT is doing. Pacheco and Co. has approached us to do a study for that. This project right here is an estimated $50 million. And apparently when you hit the 50 million threshold, with TxDOT, then it's, what's the term?
Value
Thank
engineering.
you, value engineering. And that's all, so if they've done any work on this at all, you have to include that into your $50 million estimate to VE.
And
We had-
the-
We had a meeting and it was like, I need an engineering 101. Felt like I was at NASA, about to launch Apollo 13. But this was what we were kind of focusing on. I think that provides connectivity and mobility for our residents, especially in the shops. If you come across here, it's going to allow some mobility for the Anettas, even some of the Hudson Oak folks and all their rich money. Okay.
It's not the same.
He rarely pays attention. We think that this, it also provides a lot of access to healthcare there at Texas Health. $50 million for this. That's, if the state does it, and I asked the question point blank, if I had $50 million right now, how fast could you do that project? And the answer was 6 to 7 years. And obviously, we don't have that kind of funding. And so this, that I thought would, we could probably get done fairly quickly, is going to take a little bit more time, as I'm discovering the TxDOT. And the other overriding factor was they wanted a corridor study between Center Point and 1187 Caddo Street.
Yes, pretty much. They've got their corridor studies from the west side of Fort Worth up through 1187, and then, of course, they've got the work they've been doing from Hudson Oaks on. But to make any major changes, such as put an overpass in, it would require a corridor study just to essentially know exactly what would be the best way to do it.
And that's TxDOT doing that? So I remember Norm saying that the county,
The corridor study?
yeah,
We could probably get the county to participate to some extent.
Yeah.
You can do a self-funded one and
Yeah.
give that study to them, and they'll
Yeah.
accept it, or you can wait for them to fund it themselves.
She's talking about text stuff.
Tech side.
Oh, well, no, I asked because I remember Norm, shortly after I came on council, that the county had identified Bankhead as a major thoroughfare. And that's the first that I ever heard of, you know.
But that's,
Bankhead.
that wasn't.
So I didn't know.
Yeah, but that wasn't,
That's for Bankhead.
that's for Bankhead, that's
Oh,
not for.
excuse me.
Yeah, that's not,
I-20.
Okay.
that's not for.
I think of Centerpoint, I think, okay,
Yeah, yeah.
gotcha.
Did y'all, when you put your bridge in, did they require you to do a corridor study as well?
No, we just had to go through the federal environmental process. And we had to do an IHA for the exit ramp.
Yeah.
There, but we didn't have to do a rural study. But there's a study that's being done from I-30 coming out of Fort Worth to Lake Crest. And there should be another study that COG is doing from Lake Crest all the way to Old Dennis.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I don't know how substantial that study is, but I know that there was a working group on it a couple of years ago
At the clock, right?
at the COG.
And that was the one group that we didn't have in the meeting with TxDOT,
Right.
was COG.
That was the lane study, that was the capacity study that they were doing.
But that wasn't necessarily,
It wasn't a bridge abutment study or anything like that, but they were checking corridor splits. That was just specifically a existing corridor, can we fit the lane?
can you put your extra lane in there?
Yeah, can you fit your actual capacity?
And that, you know, the study, the estimate that I got from P and K, for all of the ramp that's not included if it doesn't get folded in, to traffic and IHAR, you're looking at about 1.5 million for the studies. And that would be funded from us.
So if you're talking about tying in Bankhead, right? So I
Yes.
know Bankhead is part of the Parker County Intermodal Transportation
Mhm.
Plan, right? As a secondary,
Reliever route.
yeah,
Yeah.
reliever route. So they would probably be interested in part of that.
I think they would. Can you expand Bankhead south on that Porter property? All right, scroll back to the left just a little bit. Other way. All right, can y'all see where Old Bankhead comes in, right where that arrow is? So we've been approached by a number of individuals, developers, and landowners to extend Bankhead across that way. Where it comes out, and you're going to see the TCA exhibit later on tonight, but where it comes out at TCA, if currently you kind of go back to on a hard right, and there's a left, and I guess that's where Old Bankhead. The bridge is still there. The bridge is still intact. The mayor drove across it in his Tahoe, not mine. And that is something that we've been approached to see if we would want to participate in funding as extending that Bankhead. Now, how that incorporates with the county, I don't know. We haven't had any discussions with the county at all on this. I wanted to get y'all's opinion on it first before we even decide to look into it. Is that something y'all would be interested in just talking about and pursuing?
Yes, because I know, so whenever I was involved in Texas 21, you know, when I was involved in Texas 21 and down in
Mhm.
Austin, and I went to a couple of meetings here. Because Bankhead, there is an alternate route, there's actually federal funding available, which you're not gonna learn about from the COG, but there's federal funding, you know, public safety, you know, all that
Yeah.
type of thing, but especially since it runs parallel to the interstate. And if I-20 shuts down, there's no place for people
Mhm.
to go. So I just wanted to throw that out there, if we want to, and I believe that, Pat Dean and Doyle would be great to kind of, you know, as to, you know, some of the people I can introduce them to, just to kind of get that narrative going, that conversation going, and, perhaps it's,
I think.
any source of funding is a source of funding, because there's no sense in us paying for anything if there's no money to build it.
I agree. I think you want to do Bankhead.
Yes.
I think you want to extend that. I would, in a perfect world, I'd like to see Bankhead extended into 4 lanes from 1187 to FM5. Unfortunately, I don't get to control what happens from Hunter's Glen to TCA at the moment. But I think that's something that our citizens would like. I know that that would improve mobility on the south side of the interstate. It would probably help the Micus. Think about it. If you had that right now with Micus underway, you could exit Ranch House, hit Bankhead, and get to the Annettas.
Well, and Bruce would support this. I mean, the Annettas, people in the Annettas.
Oh, I think they
complaining
would.
all the time. So I think this could be a great collaborative effort.
And I think, in my mind at least, in terms of priorities outside of the residential streets that we talked about, in terms of priorities, I think Bankhead is probably a higher priority right now than anything we want to do on 20 outside of
Yeah.
moving the entrance
Yeah.
ramp at where Starbucks is
Yeah,
now.
I mean, there's no use in having an overpass if we don't have the overpass going.
Well, I think
Be a bridge to
I think how you put Bankhead on the map will determine where your overpass goes.
Yeah,
I mean,
Yeah.
because now you've got it connected.
well, and we can't put anything commercial in that prime property without Bankhead being connected. There's no way to get to it, or.
I think you could, but it makes
But if
Access road,
yeah you'd have
No, but it's.
yeah, but it's not. I mean,
If it's not as easy as possible to get to, nobody's gonna go to it. They're gonna
It's-
go on Amazon Prime.
it's
and-
not ideal.
Yeah.
It's not ideal, but no, I think and by the way, I excused Bernie tonight. He's watching his daughter play in a playoff game. But Bernie and I, our conversations have always been about trying to get that Ranch House intersection and relieving the congestion there.
Yes, yes.
This is one of those things. When I pulled out of there at 4:30 today, it's everybody's turning left to hit the interstate to go to FM5 or
I know.
wherever, and if we can help relieve that, I think it helps what we want to do later on down the line with Ranch House south of the interstate.
Well, our taxpayers are having to pay for the road that the Annetta people are wearing down.
Most likely.
Sorry.
Well, I think, so, I mean, in general, looking at where our staff spends time meeting with and discussing options, I mean, priorities,
Priorities are residential streets.
residential
Yes.
streets.
Squaw Creek and those roads.
Okay.
Those are the priorities.
I
Yep.
do think that discussions, though, on a political level, like, most Doyle's here, but Doyle and Pat and Bruce and us and, oh my goodness, what's your name, Mark, that they could all work together in kind of forming a plan, perhaps in a collaboration on that Bankhead, because paying for streets, how we're gonna pay for the streets? That's the trick, is we've gotta have revenue to pay for the streets. We can't go to the taxpayer unless we do a GO, but who's gonna come and vote for a street improvement in a neighborhood that they're not in? If that makes any sense. So,
But yeah, I think
but as far as engineering goes, yeah, I mean, that's the.
But we
that's
obviously,
the laying ground.
when we're looking at I-20 or Bankhead, we're looking at things that we don't fund.
Yeah,
So then the
exactly.
level of effort for our staff participating in those discussions, I guess, is what I'm,
Correct.
does anybody have any objections to staff working through those channels to see what can happen?
No, I mean,
Or
we
thoughts?
gotta be engaged in that for
Okay.
sure. So, yeah, no problem with that.
well, that's.
Okay, just wanted to confirm.
We'll, and I agree with you, Gary. I think our first priority is residential streets and getting those things. I think you want to be in the conversation. I think you're probably more aggressive with Bankhead than you are anything on 20. I think we're probably premature in doing any sort of corridor study right now. I think, if they came out and said, hey, it's $25,000, and I think we sit there and talk about it. But when you're looking at $1.5 million to do a study, quite frankly, that's outside of our city limits.
Right.
I have a problem.
And maybe funded by TxDOT.
Yeah,
in like 2 years.
Yeah.
We may not gain that much speed
Yeah.
by
I
funding ourselves.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts, Brian, on where we go forward on the residential streets? And we've got our CIP, we've got, but for the funding type of options, obviously 13+ million, we probably need to prioritize what we want to, how we want to fund.
I think
What are your
you-
thoughts on that?
I think you absolutely prioritize that. I think if you went out to the citizens and said, which streets should we start on first, you're gonna get mine on every answer. But I think you work with Raymond and you work with Derek. Raymond drives the streets every day. And so they know which ones are literally going to fail. I think Old Ford is probably one that you're gonna have to do. There's really not much, in fact, I don't even think there's part of a street there anymore. Mostly just gravel at this point.
So what can we look at as far as the timeline to getting something more, like for what we've got funded this year versus what we might need to look to potentially fund next year, whether it be through debt or,
Well, I think we've got a pretty good,
It's just-
we've got a pretty good list,
You're
especially for
good.
there's the immediate needs.
okay. Your side is good. He hasn't told me how to pay for it.
That's,
So,
and.
That's what I'm asking.
Your options are, we could do limited COs if you wanted to, 10-year notes. You could do one big GO issue, just residential streets only.
Okay,
And then worry about Squaw and Crown later and do a separate issuance.
okay.
Um,
To break it out into a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get at,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
something
'Cause if
that's
you-
not a $13 million.
You could do, if you did 8 million, you did $8 million bucks over 20 years, you're probably, you're probably looking at least $500,000 to $600,000 on
Okay.
your,
So
on
my only concern there is, so when you start segregating
Mhm.
like that, then you're looking at, you have to take into account cost of money.
Yes,
Like, the cost of money is cheap right now.
yes,
Next year it may not be so cheap,
yes.
right? So is it worth spending $13 million now, and incur this amount of debt, or
Yep.
split it up and incur more costs later?
I had someone this evening actually tell me that if you're gonna do capital improvements and you're gonna do issue debt, now is the time to issue debt. Interest rates, as you're gonna find out later, are historically low.
Right.
You won't get what we're getting on water for a street project, but they are very, very low. The problem is you're gonna go up on your interest and sinking. You're gonna go up on that tax rate on INS. But to your point, and I agree with you 100%, the cost of money and everything that entails in 2019, 2020 may not be there in 22 or 23 or 24.
Because you're gonna have to take into account, if you do a bond for all the streets now,
Mhm.
you're still gonna have to, you're talking a 2 or 3 year project.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So you're gonna end up, material costs go up every year, labor costs go up every year. So you have to take that into account as well.
Yeah, you gotta have a inflation component.
I prefer to do all of it all at one time, I'm done.
Well, the other thing
It's
is,
bad
if
for
you did
the
issue,
taxpayers.
if you did issue the 13 million, I didn't mean to cut you off, I'm
No,
sorry.
it's fine.
If you did issue the 13 million of debt, you can put that in in a vehicle that would earn in some interest for you. So it would offset that to a little bit, but not a whole lot. But, I mean, I think you're gonna have to do something immediate on most of these streets. 60% of that 13 million is residential, and of that, I'd say 50% of the residential streets probably need something done in the next 5 years.
So Brian, how do we, Derek's point, create some sort of a maintenance fund for our streets if we are gonna start looking at doing some significant improvements?
There's a couple of vehicles. We discussed the sales tax that's currently going to Parker County. You could bring that back for street improvement. But it's a little bit more politically. It's not as easy because it takes a county vote. We just can't vote to get it back. But you could use that to fund your streets. You could do a street assessment fee that's tied to your garbage bill if you wanted to. It's kind of a backwards way of taxing your residents, but you could assess a fee. That's pretty much your two main vehicles. I mean, to get the kind of cash that you need up front, you're looking at a pretty good. You're going to have to issue debt to get that bulk of cash, and then how are you going to pay that debt off is the question, I think, is the conversation we probably need to have. You'll never be able to save your way up to get 13 million.
Right.
Well,
Mine was more of just the maintenance aspect.
and I was
of
gonna
it.
say,
So-
if I could ask on that, you mentioned concrete, that we need a maintenance program for our concrete. I'm assuming we don't have one right now. So is that something we can prepare, like,
When the-
that you
when
could
you-
give us an idea of what
Yeah.
we need to be doing now? Some of these concrete roads are
And when we
10 years old.
Yeah.
bring the numbers to us on the roads, include in there, okay, this is what the maintenance fee would be. This is what we need, the maintenance fee would need every year, like, so we can kind of have an
Yeah, you just tell me
idea,
what you
an
wanna
over,
accomplish with it. I mean,
yeah, an
you're talking
overview
about a
on.
maintenance program, that's one thing. You're
Well-
talking about debt, if you're supplementing debt service.
So we're talking two separate things here. I think your
Yeah.
debt your debt service would be tied to an interest in sinking.
Yes.
Right.
And then we're talking about, 100, what could you do on a maintenance for
Yes.
100,000 a year? Does
Yes.
that get your concrete? I think what they're asking is, could we issue the debt, pay for the reconstruction through interest in sinking, and then take our 100,000 that we're trying to just, plug the dam with, and use that as a maintenance program? And would that cover that 5-year model that you're talking about? Would that cover?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to, I think you're gonna have to make the decision to use that money for maintenance as
Yeah.
opposed to rebuilding streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna use that on half a block.
Yeah.
Or if you use it for maintenance, you can keep all your streets, all the ones that are currently.
Right.
Yeah.
But but if we rebuild everything, start from ground zero, and on your 5-year maintenance model for asphalt and whatever it is for concrete, if we budgeted $100,000 a year, would that cover your maintenance costs?
Right. And I can work that.
Okay.
I can tell you that
Right.
right now, it would without question, because you don't have enough streets.
Right.
Yeah, to maintain that doesn't need to be reconstructed. Well, I guess that would be the question I have, is that if we could know, as we talk about reconstructing streets, that we're maintaining the ones we're not
Yeah.
looking to reconstruct, that we've got that in our budget and we've got that plan in place to make sure that our 30-year concrete roads don't have to be replaced in 15 years.
Yeah, and
instead of-
even now, I mean, the maintenance on the concrete is not gonna be a lot. Asphalt's a different
Right,
matter.
okay.
And the other comment I have is, if we're talking about doing the whole game, right, then that's something that should be put in front of the voters.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
that-
I don't
that's,
think there's any way to.
there's no question about that. No, that's, I would absolutely do that. But I would put the caveat in there, if you do it all in one project. You
Right.
don't piecemeal that out.
Right.
Right.
Okay, any other comments on the transportation?
Would y'all, Eric Maha's gonna be here tonight. Would y'all like for me to engage with him? Just spitball what it would cost?
Yes, we need some
Yeah.
numbers, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to see us start to pull together ideas that if we're thinking of a GO at some point in the future, this is obviously something we want to include, transportation projects, residential streets, so,
And what we can afford.
yeah, I'd like to see,
And put together a presentation that takes our CIP, puts the numbers beside on it.
Yeah,
what
yeah,
that's
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
be. So
Okay,
it's
I'll-
something that the residents would be able to access,
Right, we don't know what our interest rate environment's gonna be.
Right.
No.
long term. We need to move on this.
Right.
Yeah.
We're gonna do this, so.
right, and
Okay.
I think that's a good,
Alrighty.
all right, any other comments from council?
All right.
Okay. All right, we will adjourn the transportation workshop at 6:50 and take a 10-minute recess before the council meeting, which I see the mayor.